Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Racha HaKodash, and double honors to my apostles, a great millstone, and peace and salutation to the hopeful members of the elect, the Bacharium of the house of David, that's been preordained, predestined to get delivered in these last times and to be the ruling governing body of the nation of Yasha'Allah. Now, this is from Professor Yang. The petrodollar just collapsed. Iran's Yuan oil shockwave, and the Yuan is a Chinese currency. All right, now the description says, what if the global financial system is quietly shifting right in front of us? And it is. These elites, they want to bring in a new digital financial system, and ultimately it'll transition into that chip. In this powerful 8-minute story, we explore how Iran selling oil in Chinese yuan could challenge the long-standing dominance of the U.S. dollar and what that means for the future of global power. So let's hear what Professor Yang has to say.
2 weeks into this conflict, Iran delivered its most striking move yet. It wasn't a missile, a drone, or any conventional weapon. Instead, it was a single sentence from
Let's go back.
52 years ago. A deal between Washington and Riyadh created the financial foundation of American global power. Today, in the narrow waters between Iran and Oman, that foundation is quietly being dismantled. Whether the dollar survives this crisis could shape global economics for the next 50 years, far more than any missile or...
There won't be another 50 years. Hell, not even another 5 years. This place is on its way out, man. All right? You can clearly see, and through prophecy, we know we're very close.
Drone over Tehran. Think about that. 2 weeks into this conflict, Iran delivered its most striking move yet. It wasn't a missile, a drone, or any conventional weapon. Instead, it was a single sentence from a senior Iranian official to CNN on a Saturday morning. Iran would allow oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, but only if the payments were made in Chinese yuan, not dollars.
Right, and that's going to be very detrimental to the U.S. dollar. All right, the Iranian senior official said they will let oil tankers in because, the Strait of Hormuz is partially closed, which that passage allows, or that passage, it transports 20% of the world's oil. It goes through that passage. All right, so now they're letting oil tankers in, but only to buy the oil in the yuan, a Chinese currency. All right, the U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency, and the petrodollar, to buy oil, you had to buy it in USD. All right, the U.S. dollar. Okay, that's what made America so. One of the ways that made America so powerful. All right, the military. Okay, and that U.S. dollar. Okay. So let's continue.
Just 4 words, Yuan only, but they carry more impact than any explosion or strike over the past 14 days. This isn't a military maneuver. It's a direct challenge to the system that has placed the United States at the center of the global economy for half a century. Today, we'll unpack what this statement really means, why it's far more significant than anything you've seen on TV, and what could happen globally.
Right, because, dive into some history. In 1971, we had Richard Nixon, former president. He took the gold standard out of the U.S. dollar because that's what the U.S. dollar was backed by. I believe $35 you can buy an ounce of gold. Okay. But eventually they stopped that. They stopped that. All right. Again, 1971. All right. Because that system was already collapsing. A lot of money was being printed during the Vietnam War, plus spending, right? Other nations, they demanded gold for their dollars, and the U.S. simply just didn't have enough dollars or they simply didn't have enough gold for the dollars. All right, so now it became fiat, which is it's backed by the trust of the government. All right. It's backed by the trust of the government. You see? And then in the early 1970s, they made a pact with, the Gulf nations, all right, to simply, in order to buy oil, it had to be in USD, and they promised them what? Security, protection, weapons, all right, and economic benefits, all right, which is now it's funny because Iran showed like, look, you can't protect, your allied nations in the so-called Middle East, these Arab nations, because Iran bombed, sent missile strikes to a few of them, hitting U.S. bases and embassies. So these Arab nations, they're looking at the U.S. like, okay, you're not fulfilling what you promised on protection, all right, security. So we'll see how that goes, all right. But this is gonna definitely sabotage and disrupt the financial system in America, all right. So let's continue. And if this hits America, once America collapses, it's going to be a domino effect. All these other nations will suffer. All right?
This approach spreads. When people hear petrodollar, many tune out. It sounds technical, abstract, or like something discussed in boardrooms far from the battlefield. But here's the truth. The petrodollar system is why America can project military power across the world. It's why the US can run deficits that would sink almost any other nation. Despite trillions spent on wars, debt, and global operations, the dollar remains the currency every country
Right, he said, let's go back again what he just said, right?
It's why the US can run deficits that would sink almost in the battlefield. But here's the truth. The petrodollar system is why America can project military power across the world. It's why the US can run
the petrodollar, he said, it's the reason why, hold on, this,
deficits that some discuss in boardrooms far from the battlefield. But here's the truth. The petrodollar system is why America can project military power across the world.
He said the petrodollar is the reason why America can project military power across the world, okay? And he does that through his military bases, okay? Also, America has embassies all throughout the globe, You'll find a U.S. military base in South Korea. You won't find a South Korean military base in America, okay? So let's get Habakkuk, what's that, 2, the verse 5. Yea, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man. This is Esau Edom, all right? Neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death. This man has messed up the whole entire earth. And everyone's calling this man out, all right? Starting with the prophets. But you have regular people on TikTok, all right, and other social media platforms calling out this devil, okay? Even his own people. It says what? That his own tongue shall fall upon him, okay? And it says, and is as death and cannot be satisfied, right? Esau is a greedy, Edomites are very greedy, all right? Their traits are very greedy, all right? And they can never have enough, you see? And they want to go against the nature of how the Most High set up things upon the earth, Now they want to introduce clone meat, They put GMOs in the food, chemtrails in the sky. Like what are you doing? All right? They want to truly just, they're the wicked, okay? They want to go against life. They, again, and is as death. They're the opposite of life. And it says, but gathereth unto him all nations and heapeth unto him all people, right? Now, America is a melting pot, has all nations in this place, but also America is spread out through its military bases, okay? You will find, the Esau Edom, you'll find him throughout the world because through his military bases, all right? His influence, okay? And he had a stronghold over the earth through that petrodollar. All right, all these other nations, if they wanted oil, they had to buy it in U.S. dollars. Okay, So let's go back.
Why the U.S. can run deficits that would sink almost any other nation.
Right,
Despite
and that's nothing to America, you know. Even though we're $1 trillion in debt, it's really nothing. Okay.
trillions spent on
And
wars,
that's what he's saying, you know. That's exactly what he's saying.
debt, and global operations, the dollar remains the currency every country needs to hold.
Yeah. The dollar remains the currency every country needs to hold. But see, the elites, they're pushing that out. They're getting rid of they want the dollar to collapse. Why? The whole end goal is for that chip. Okay? Digital currency is on the rise, definitely. You know, this digital financial system, but the whole end goal truly is that RFID chip embedded under your skin. Revelation, the 13th chapter, verse 16. You won't be able to buy or sell. So it's going to be control over buying and selling. All right? Transporting goods and buying in your regular grocery store is going to be control over that. And that's going to be dictated if you have the chip or not. All right? And we're here to tell you to not take the chip, you Israelites. All right? Which consists of Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Also, we've been scattered. Okay? And you Christians, you know, you say you believe in God, but you're not pushing the MOTB, the chip. All right? I mean, some you know, because they hear our videos, some do. Okay? But even you Israelites, you other Israelite camps, you don't even push the MOTB, which is crazy. All right? Are you not watching? Are you not seeing what's going on in the world? How the system is about to collapse? How they're introducing a new financial system right before our very eyes? Okay?
Disrupt or seriously weaken that system, and the financial bedrock of American power begins to shake. Wars, debt, and global operations, the dollar remains the currency every country needs to hold. Disrupt or seriously weaken that system, and the financial bedrock of American power begins to shake. And with this announcement, Iran just hurled a stone at that foundation.
Right.
To see why this matters, we need to go
now they want to, you know, trade the oil in Chinese yuan.
Back to 1971. Before then, every dollar was tied to gold. Each note in circulation could at least theoretically be exchanged for gold stored in U.S. vaults. Nations trusted the dollar because of that guarantee. But when President Richard Nixon ended the gold standard, the dollar faced a question it had never encountered: why should anyone trust it? The answer came from the Middle East.
Right, and just elaborate on 1944 during the Bretton Woods Conference. That's when the U.S. dollar became the world reserve currency. Okay, again, it was backed by gold. Okay, the U.S. dollar was backed by gold. Not anymore. Again, he just broke it down. 1971, former President Richard Nixon took that out. All right, and in the early 70s, which he's going to go into, all right, they made it to where the oil, all right, had to be bought in USD. Okay, again, the U.S. dollar is fiat. It's backed by the strength of the United States economy. All right, trust in the government. All right, global trade use, you know, especially in oil. All right, and military and geopolitical power. Okay, ultimately, again, that's the fiat currency is backing by the trust of the government. It's worthless. Okay, so now Iran is saying like, hey, well, screw you guys. We're not gonna, if you want to use our passage, you want to come in and buy this oil, you got to buy it in the yuan. We're gonna because we're already allied with China, so you got to buy it in the yuan. Okay, that's gonna cripple America. Expect gas prices to rise, commodities in these grocery stores to rise, to inflate, to hyperinflate. Okay, and China's not gonna be the next world power. No, prophecy said once this kingdom goes down, once Yahushua returns, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, he's going to establish his kingdom upon the earth, a righteous kingdom. and all you heathens will be in slavery. Okay, but see, these nations, ultimately is these elites. They're actually fighting amongst each other to see who's going to take the seat to rule. All right, but they all have that one goal in mind. All right, to collapse this society and bring in a new society. This is their mindset, and within that new society, it will be the chip. All right, that will be enforced upon the masses, so they can have people to be a perpetual slave. This is their mindset. It won't succeed. Job 5 verse 12 tells you that. Okay? How... Actually, let me just get it. Okay, let me just... Hope I don't lose my... Because sometimes my thing be bugging. Let me just get this real quick. Where you at, Job? Job 5 verse 12. Okay, he disappointed the devices of the crafty so that their hands cannot perform the enterprise. Enterprise, the New World Order. The crafty is the Edomites. All right, start the international banking families. Who's going to disappoint them? Yahweh Shai when he returns. All right, we're going to put them in chains and shackles. All right, all these other nations will be in slavery. Okay, and the kingdom of heaven will be established upon the earth, and it'll be, man, beautiful, man. Righteousness will flourish, and man, a happily ever after for us Israelites, starting with the Lord's elect. But let's continue.
When President Richard Nixon ended the gold standard, the dollar faced a question it had never encountered: why should anyone trust it? The answer came from the Middle East. In 1974, the United States made a deal with Saudi Arabia. The kingdom agreed to...
All right, they made a deal with Saudi Arabia.
Price all its oil sales in U.S. dollars.
Right, and so, they had an agreement to price all their oil sales in U.S. Dollars, USD. So to buy this oil, you had to buy it in U.S. dollars, okay? And Saudi Arabia actually didn't renew their contract. All right. Actually, let me see if I can find that. Let me bear me 1 second. Let me see. Saudi Arabia didn't. Here. Oh wow. See, already on it. Claims that Saudi Arabia refused to renew a petrodollar agreement with the U.S. upon its supposed expiration on June 9th, 2024 are false. Oh, it says false. I remember doing a lesson on this. Let me see. Well, if that's false, then these nations, they're going to break ties with America, because remember, he's actually going to break it down. Why did they make that agreement? For security and weapons, all right, and economic benefits. Let me see if this says it. I'm gonna be very quick. I don't want to go too deep into this. Did a deal between Saudi Arabia and U.S. sell oil and dollars expire? Let's see. It says, but the claims are false. All right, because I remember doing a lesson on this last year, and but either way, watch them break it down, okay?
In exchange, America promised military protection. OPEC followed suit, nation by nation.
That's the reason why they did it, was for military protection. Well, Iran just sent missile strikes to several U.S. military bases in those Arab nations and in those Gulf nations, all right? So they're going to look at America like, I don't know now. Actually, there's a guy, he goes by Riyadh, all right? Very informative. This is Myra Gaines' younger brother. I'm going to watch this later, definitely. It says, this war could fracture our partnership in the Middle East. Riyadh explains how. I'm going to watch that later. But check it out, okay? I didn't watch it yet. But if that alliance breaks, yeah, that's going to definitely cripple America even more so, all right? Because we can still get oil, all right, from... He's going to break it all down. We can get oil still from those, Gulf nations, but not as much as, as we could if Iran opens that passage back up for us. All right.
And the world oil market became dollar denominated. The result was extraordinary. Suddenly, every country that needed oil, which was every country, had to hold US dollars.
Right, because all these other nations, all right, during their especially after the Industrial Revolution, ran on energy systems, power stations, all right. So oil was very needed.
Japan needed dollars.
Oil is very needed. Okay.
China needed dollars. India, Germany, Brazil, all industrial nations had to maintain dollar reserves to keep their energy flowing.
Right.
This arrangement created a permanent structural demand for the US dollar. That demand allowed America to borrow without limits, spend endlessly, and maintain.
That's how America became on top, all right, with that US dollar. Okay.
A global military presence that no other country could match. The petrodollar is far more than an economic deal. It's the backbone of American global power. And for 52 years, it has endured because
it's the backbone of America's power. All right. Actually, let me repeat that. Let him repeat that again.
That no other country could match. The petrodollar is far more than an economic deal. It's the backbone of American global power.
Yeah, it's the backbone of American global power. You hear that? So this is going to cause a disruption, all right? And ultimately, again, it's all planned out by the elites. They want this dollar to collapse, you see?
And for 52 years, it has endured because every attempt to challenge it has been crushed. Iran is not the first to test this system. In 2000, Saddam Hussein tried moving Iraq's oil sales from dollars to euros. 3 years later, the U.S. invaded, and Iraq's oil...
Right, exactly. Weapons of war, weapons of mass destruction. That was all BS, the 9/11. That was really by your own government, all right? You see, they had a false flag attack and blamed it on Iraq, okay? To go in there to invade. That was the reason why, because Saddam Hussein wanted to get away from the U.S. dollar and go into the euro, all right? You see? So Esau would do that. He would set up a coup, all right, orchestrate a coup or whatever to get you out of there. If the leaders of that nation start to get any ideas to move away from American influence and power, all right, the American dollar. If they want to get away from that, they will take you out.
Oil returned to dollar pricing. Muammar Gaddafi suggested a gold-backed pan-African currency for oil trade. In 2011, NATO intervened in Libya. Gaddafi was killed, and the plan died with him. Venezuela.
Again, see, he said Gaddafi, and he wanted his people to flourish. Okay. He wanted his people to flourish. All right. I forgot the benefits he wanted to do for his people, but either way, Libya would have flourished. All right. Let's go back again, actually.
Gaddafi suggested a gold-backed pan-African currency for oil trade.
A gold-backed pan-African. All right. Let's go back again, actually, Slakia.
3 years later, the U.S. invaded, and Iraq's oil returned to dollar pricing. Muammar Gaddafi suggested a gold-backed pan-African currency for oil trade.
Yeah. So Gaddafi wanted a gold-backed pan-African for oil trade. All right. Again, Saddam Hussein. All right. He wanted to get away from the U.S. dollars and move it to euros for, to buy in their oil. All right. And they took both of them out. Okay.
In 2011, NATO intervened in Libya. Gaddafi was killed, and the plan died with him. Venezuela, under Nicolas Maduro, pushed oil trade outside the dollar and strengthened ties with China. In January 2026, the U.S. moved against him.
See, that was the main reason. That was the main reason. All right. That was the main reason for the oil. Okay. Let's go back one more time, actually.
And the plan died with him. Venezuela, under Nicolas Maduro, pushed oil trade outside the dollar and strengthened ties with China. In January 2026.
So, yeah, they pushed oil trade outside the dollar and strengthened ties with China. All right. So America had to intervene and say, oh, no, you're not. Okay. And ultimately, America wants that oil.
The U.S. moved against him as well. Analysts call this pattern the petrodollar war theory, the idea that countries challenging dollar-based oil pricing face consequences far beyond normal diplomacy.
Right, but see, they can't do nothing to Iran. All right? The only way is that they'll have to escalate this war dramatically, and but they do that. These world nations are watching, because they have policy laws when it comes to global warfare. So they're gonna be like, hey, intervene, and hey, you can't do that. Hey, so we're in very interesting times, man. Okay.
Iran, a country the U.S. has been bombing for 14 days, has announced it will reopen the Strait of Hormuz, but only under conditions that bypass the dollar entirely. This is deliberate. A senior Iranian official told CNN that Iran is considering allowing a limited number of oil tankers to transit the strait if the payments are made in Chinese yuan. Notice what this means. Iran isn't just reopening Hormuz. It's reopening it on new financial terms that exclude the dollar, favor China, and set a precedent.
Right, so they want to get away from the U.S. dollar. So in order to come in here and buy this oil and to use our passage, all right, which is very vital. Okay, again, 20% of the world's oil goes through that way, flows through that passage. You have to buy it in the Chinese yuan.
Never seen in the 52-year history of the petrodollar system. The Revolutionary Guard Navy has already started issuing what analysts call IRGC certificates, permits allowing ships to pass. Iran controls the valve, and now it controls which currency you must use to open it. For China, financial terms that exclude the dollar, favor China, and set a precedent never seen in the 52-year history of the petrodollar system.
Right.
The Revolutionary Guard Navy has already started issuing what analysts call IRGC certificates, permits allowing ships to pass. Iran controls the valve, and now it controls which currency you must use to open it. For China, this is huge. Beijing has spent years trying to expand the yuan's role in global oil trade through yuan-denominated futures on the Shanghai Exchange, swap lines with dozens of countries and other measures. All of it has been building toward a moment like this, a major oil choke point operating in yuan, not dollar.
I just want to touch on that. All right, I don't want to go too much or go too long. Okay, so hopefully this was edifying. You got a little history and some scriptures. Okay, and geopolitical news matter. So hopefully it was edifying. All right. So with that, hey, shalom.